All right, welcome back. So, in part one, we put together our polymer backbone. But let's be real, a backbone by itself isn't going to cut it. Now we get to do the really fun part. We're going to become master formulators and add all the crucial ingredients that turn that basic polymer into a perfect high-performance film coating. Okay, so we've got our polymer, but what happens if we just stop there? Well, it would be a complete disaster. A pure polymer film is often as fragile as a pane of glass. It can crack, it's totally transparent, and it offers pretty much zero protection. To transform this into the elegant, robust coating we're actually after, we need to bring in the rest of the team, the all-important excipients. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start by making the film flexible with plasticizers. Then we'll give our tablet an identity with colorants. After that, we need to figure out the delivery system using solvents. We'll add some helpers, auxiliary agents, to make sure the whole process runs smoothly. And finally, we'll put it all together with a checklist for the perfect coated tablet. Let's jump in. All right, first up is our biggest challenge. That raw polymer film, think of it like a dry leaf in the fall, right? The slightest bit of pressure and it just crumbles into dust. And that's obviously not going to work for a tablet that has to survive manufacturing, bottling, and shipping. So the question is, how do we give it the strength and flexibility it needs to protect that core? Well, the answer is a fascinating little molecule called a plasticizer. The best way to think of it is as a molecular lubricant. It's really clever. It literally wedges itself between all those tangled polymer chains, pushing them apart just enough to weaken the rigid forces holding them together. This simple action gives the chains room to move, to slide past one another. And just like that, it transforms a brittle sheet into a tough, flexible, and resilient film. Now, this is where the science gets really cool. Just look at the variety of plasticizers we have to play with. This is definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation. You've got everything from simple polyols to much more complex esters. A formulator's choice here is absolutely critical. They might pick something like triethyl citrate for a high-performance water-based system because it's super efficient. Or they might stick with a common PEG for a more versatile formulation. It's all about matching the right plasticizer to the polymer and the delivery system to get that perfect flexibility. Great! So our film is now tough and flexible. But there's a problem. It's completely invisible. And a transparent coat doesn't help a patient tell their heart medication from their painkiller, it doesn't build a brand, and, crucially, it won't protect a drug that degrades in sunlight. So it's time to give our tablet an identity and a protective shield. And to do this, we use two very different tools. On one hand, you have colorants. These are things like iron oxides for those earthy reds and yellows, or vibrant dye lakes for real pop of color. These create the visual identity, the brand, and they are essential for safety, helping everyone from the pharmacist to the patient instantly recognize the right pill. On the other hand, you have opacifiers, and the undisputed king here is titanium dioxide. Its main job is to make the coating opaque, creating a powerful shield that blocks light and protects sensitive drugs from breaking down. This slide gives you a glimpse of the formulator's palette, from natural minerals to synthetic dyes. But here's the single most important takeaway, especially if you're studying or working in this field. Look at that last point. This is not art class. You can't just pick a color you like. Every single pigment has to be approved by regulatory bodies like the FDA or the EMA. Choosing an unapproved colorant is an absolute deal breaker that will stop a product dead in its tracks. Period. Okay, our recipe is really coming together. We've got a flexible, colored polymer blend. But right now, it's just a pile of powder. The big question is, how do we transform this powder into a liquid that can be sprayed as a perfectly even film onto millions of tiny tablets? This is the critical job of the delivery system, the solvents and vehicles. You know, if we were having this conversation 30 years ago, we'd mostly be talking about harsh organic solvents like alcohols. But look at this chart. It shows a dramatic story of change. Driven by huge concerns over worker safety, environmental pollution, and cost, the industry has overwhelmingly moved to aqueous systems. Today, simple, purified water is the workhorse vehicle for getting that coating onto the tablet. And this slide perfectly illustrates the fundamental trade-off. Organic solvents are fast. They evaporate in a flash, which makes for a quick process. But they come with a heavy price. They're flammable, toxic, and a nightmare for the environment. On the other side, you have water. It's safe, cheap, and green, but it's slow to evaporate, which means longer processing times and higher energy bills. Because of this, the industry's rule is pretty simple. You use water unless you absolutely can't. For instance, if you're coating a drug that would be destroyed by moisture.
We are on the home stretch of building our formula. The last ingredients we need to add are the auxiliary agents. Think of them as the unsung heroes of the process. You only use the tiny amount, but without them, the entire manufacturing run could turn into a sticky, clumpy mess. They really are the secret to a smooth and efficient operation.
Let's look at the two main players here. First, you've got anti-tacking agents. Just picture thousands of warm, sticky tablets tumbling over each other in a giant drum. They're going to want to stick together in one big lump. An agent like talc acts like a microscopic powder, creating a fine barrier that keeps them separated. Then you have surfactants. Their job is to tackle clumping in the liquid itself. Without them, your color pigments would bunch up, leading to a blotchy, uneven coat. Surfactants make sure everything stays perfectly suspended for a flawless finish. And there we have it. Our formula is complete. We've taken our basic polymer and added a plasticizer for strength, colorants for identity, a solvent for delivery, and auxiliary agents for processability. We have all the pieces, so let's put it all together and define our endgame. What does the ideal coated tablet actually look like? This checklist is our North Star. It's so much more than just a pretty color. A perfect coating has to adhere like glue to the tablet core. It needs to be tough enough to withstand the journey from the factory to the patient. Most importantly, it can't mess with the drug's release profile, unless, of course, it's an enteric coat specifically designed to do that. And the final massive challenge? It has to do all of this perfectly, not just once, but for millions and millions of tablets, every single time. So we have the perfect recipe. But a recipe on paper is one thing. Turning it into millions of flawless tablets is a completely different beast. It is a massive engineering challenge. How do you control the temperature, the airflow, the spray rate? How do you get a perfect coat on every single tablet? That is exactly what we're going to explore in part 3, where we'll step onto the factory floor and break down the entire industrial coating process. I'll see you there.